December 27, 1942, Port Moresby, New Guinea. Lightning in the air. Morning light stretched along the steel planking at Leyte airfield as crews dragged camouflage off a row of twin-boom silhouettes. 12 Lockheed P-38F Lightnings from the 39th Fighter Squadron, 35th Fighter Group, sat fueled, armed, and ready, those twin tails catching the first rays over the tropics. An intelligence flash from the Coast Watchers. Major Japanese strike inbound. Multiple formations closing on Buna. Estimate: 40 aircraft with fighter cover. Intercept window: 30 minutes. Captain Thomas Lynch checked his gauges and gave the signal. Among the pilots was Second Lieutenant Richard Bong, temporarily attached from the 49th, 9th Squadron, while his unit waited on its own P-38s. None of them knew this morning would mark a turning point in Pacific air combat. The Japanese heading for Buna had glimpsed P-38s only briefly in recent weeks. Reports about the odd twin-boom fighter were fuzzy. Within hours, that uncertainty would turn into shock. For 13 months, the Imperial Navy's best had ruled the skies. The Mitsubishi A6M-0's famous agility had haunted Allied pilots everywhere. Turn radius around 950 feet, climbed to 6,000 feet in 7 minutes, 27 seconds. Top speed near 331 mph. Those numbers had driven victories across China and the early Pacific campaigns. American pilots in Bell P-39 era Cobras and Curtiss P-40 Warhawks had learned the hard way. Try to turn with a zero, and you probably die. The P-38 Lightning came from a different playbook. 2 Allison V-1710s at 150 horsepower each. Turbo-superchargers holding power where other engines gasped. Maximum speed, 414 mph. Service ceiling, 44,000 feet. And all the guns in the nose, 120mm Hispano plus 450 cal Brownings, firing straight ahead with no wing gun convergence issues. Richard Bong had memorized those specs back at Hamilton Field, California. A farm kid from Poplar, Wisconsin, trained in the CPT program, he knew the Lightning's edge wasn't in turning with zeros. It was in refusing the turn fight entirely. Speed, altitude, firepower, attack from above, slash through, climb back up. That demanded discipline and the ability to ignore old dogfighting habits. In the incoming Japanese force, veteran carrier-trained pilots flew standard escort patterns. The mixed group, A6M-0s, Kai-43 Oscar fighters, and D-3A Val dive bombers, was elite. They had run the board from Pearl Harbor to the Dutch East Indies with little resistance. U.S. fighters usually faltered above 15,000 feet. Their climb left them predictable and easy. Today looked routine. Escort Vals to Buna, suppress Allied fighters. Go home. Those odd twin-boom planes seen lately? Many assumed they were recon or light bombers. The idea that the Americans had built a fighter to erase the Zero's strengths hadn't really landed. But at 18,000 feet, the P-38s owned the fight. Captain Lynch led the dive, his Lightning pushing past 400 mph. Bong and the others picked targets. Nose-mounted guns let them open up beyond 400 yards, outside the Zero's sweet spot. Lynch blew an Oscar apart on the first pass, 20mm Colt 50 cal, tearing it to pieces. As Lynch zoomed back up, Zero pilots tried to follow but hit violent buffeting, nearing 400 mph in the dive. Warning klaxons barked as they neared structural limits. Bong spotted a Zero angling for Lynch and snapped into a deflection shot. His first burst hit. The Zero spun down in flames. 3 more Zeros closed on him. Bong shoved the throttles and dove, passing 450 mph. The Japanese could only watch the strange twin-boom fighter streak away, untouchable. Pulling out just over the trees, Bong caught a Val pulling up from its run. A short burst at 100 yards lit it and drove it into the jungle. 2 confirmed. Bong's first kills, the start of the top-scoring American ace career of the war. The whole fight took under 10 minutes. The 39th Squadron claimed 12 Japanese down, kills for Lynch, Bong, and 2nd Lieutenant Karl Planck among them, with no P-38 losses. Japanese after-action notes sounded rattled. Pilots described enemies with impossible speed and climb, shooting from beyond normal ranges. The cozy horizontal dogfight world where they excelled had become a vertical arena where speed and altitude decided everything. Shock waves hit Naval Aviation HQ at Rabaul. Intelligence scrambled to re-rate the P-38. Twin engines had made them file it as a heavy fighter, poor for air-to-air. They hadn't expected a machine built to win vertically, not by outturning. The technical shift only grew clearer in later clashes. Turbo-superchargers kept the P-38 strong where normal engines lost half their power. Its dive speeds approached compressibility zones far quicker than Japanese airframes could handle without tearing up. Converting speed back into altitude, P-38s could be back on top in seconds. On January 7, 1943, the new reality was undeniable. 9 Lightnings scored in bombers over Leyte met roughly 20 Japanese fighters. Old doctrine said the outnumbered Americans should go defensive. Instead, they climbed to 25,000 feet and dove from levels the Japanese couldn't reach. Bong, now flying steadily with the 39th while waiting on his own unit's P-38s, showed how lethal the Lightning could be. He dove from height and cut down a Ki-43 with a 300-yard deflection shot. As the enemy tried to claw upward, Bong Chandel climbed back to 20,000 feet, outside their envelope, picked another target, and repeated. Vertical geometry was something the Japanese had never faced. A 0 could outturn anything American, but it couldn't follow a P-38's dive without risking the airframe. It couldn't match a Lightning's zoom climb without stalling. It couldn't run down a P-38 that chose to extend and leave. The flat, turning battlefield the Japanese owned had become a true 3D fight, where altitude and velocity beat turn radius. Veterans struggled to adapt. Their training lived at close range, get on the tail by superior turning. Against the P-38, that was useless. By the time a 0 worked into firing position, the Lightning was already a mile away, climbing through bands the 0 couldn't touch. The mental strain hit hard. Pilots who'd enjoyed a quality edge since the start suddenly felt powerless against an enemy that refused their game. The constant need to scan high, knowing death might drop from unreachable altitudes, ate at morale. Some began showing combat stress that hadn't been part of their military culture before. By February 1943, P-38 strength in the Southwest Pacific was rising fast. The 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th finally got its own Lightnings. The 80th Squadron of the 8th Fighter Group began moving off P-39s and into P-38s. The all-Lightning 425th Fighter Group was forming in Australia. Each arriving unit had pored over reports from Lynch, Bong, and others, sharpening tactics that squeezed every advantage from the type. Training under squadron leaders drilled one rule above all: hold the high ground. Altitude is life insurance. Speed is life. Pilots learned to ignore the pull to turn with enemy fighters, keeping velocity and working the vertical. The high-speed yo-yo converted spare speed into altitude while reversing course. The barrel roll attack used the Lightning's roll to keep guns on while preserving momentum. Japanese counters fell short. The Kawasaki Ki-61, Tony, with its liquid-cooled engine and heavier guns, was built to tangle with high-flying bombers, yet it still couldn't match the P-38 above 20,000 feet. The Nakajima Ki 4-4 Tojo chased climb and speed at the cost of agility, but even that lagged the Lightning's total performance. Intercepts and intelligence summaries from Japanese units began to sound strained. Orders circulated. Avoid P-38s unless you have numbers and position. Don't fight above 15,000 feet if you can help it. The Lightning owns that sky. Some tried to drag P-38s down into low-level turn fights, but American pilots held discipline and refused bad engagements. Industry widened the gap. Lockheed's Burbank line hit a rhythm. By March 1943, 10 P-38s a day were coming off the floor. Each airframe took roughly 37,000 man-hours, yet American capacity made that sustainable. Japan, squeezed by shortages and mounting damage, struggled to replace losses. Training only worsened the divide. U.S. P-38 pilots arrived with 300-plus flight hours, often 50 in type, and practice in vertical tactics, gunnery, and formation work. Japanese replacements rushed through cut-down programs averaged under 100 hours. Many had never seen 20,000 feet before they met a Lightning in combat. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea in March 1943 showed the P-38's wider reach. Lightnings rode top cover for Allied bombers, hitting a major convoy. When Zero escorts climbed a challenge, the P-38s executed clean vertical attacks, knocking down fighters and leaving the convoy bare. 8 transports and 4 destroyers went under, smashing reinforcement plans. As the Solomons Air War tilted, certain U.S. names started to stand out. Captain Thomas Lynch of the 39th refined vertical fighting into a craft, ending with 20 confirmed before his death in March 1944. Richard Bong kept stacking victories, uncanny in setting up perfect deflection shots. August 1943 added a new Lightning ace, Lieutenant Thomas McGuire, posted to the just-formed 475th Group's 401st Squadron, scored first on August 18th over Wewak. Covering bombers, his flight met roughly 20 Japanese fighters. In his first fight, he downed 2 Ki-43 Oscars and a Ki-61 Tony. 2 days later, he added 2 more, making ace in 48 hours. McGuire pushed aggressive vertical attacks and exact gunnery, later writing Combat Tactics in the Southwest Pacific area, which became 5th Air Force gospel. He taught the McGuire roll, a high-speed barrel roll to keep offense without bleeding energy, and the vertical reverse, using the P-38's climb to swap rolls with a pursuer. The bigger meaning, though, spread beyond single duels. With range past 1,000 miles on drop tanks, Lightnings let planners hit bases once thought safe. Fighter sweeps could reach Rabaul from New Guinea, clearing the sky before the bombers showed. Full route escort erased the gaps Japanese interceptors once exploited. April 18, 1943, proved what only a P-38 could do. American codebreakers caught Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's inspection schedule. The intercept needed a 435-mile overwater run from Guadalcanal, dead reckoning navigation skimming the ocean, and timing to the minute. Only the P-38 had the legs, the speed, and the kit. Major John Mitchell of the 339th Squadron, 347th Group, led 16 Lightnings on the longest planned fighter intercept of the war. They flew at wave-top height under radar, radio silent, holding course by pure reckoning for more than 2 hours. Mitchell's plot was exact. At 09:34, right on cue, 2 G4M Betty bombers with 6 escorts crossed the point. Captain Thomas Lanphier Jr. and Lieutenant Rex Barber rolled in as top cover tied down the fighters. Barber's burst ripped into the lead bomber, which crashed into the jungle, killing Japan's most brilliant naval mind and dealing a deep blow to morale. That shock ran through Japanese command. If American fighters could reach that far, that precisely, no one was out of reach. After Midway and Guadalcanal, another myth cracked. The P-38 had shown not just tactical edge, but strategic reach Japan hadn't planned against. In the aftermath, Japanese fighter orders turned defensive, attacked P-38s only with altitude in hand, at least 3-to-1 numbers, and surprise. If the first strike failed, break off at once. It was the reverse of the aggressive creed that had defined their early war doctrine. New airframes didn't restore balance. The Ka-84 Frank, appearing late 1943, could run with a P-38 at medium altitudes, but faded above 25,000 feet. The Mitsubishi J-2M Raiden climbed fast and worked higher air, but lacked range and handling finesse. Neither arrived in numbers that could shift the tide. By November 1943, the change was complete. Japanese daylight flying over the Solomons had almost stopped. Warships moved after dark. Outposts were fed by submarines and night destroyer dashes. The proud air arm that had raced across the Pacific in 1941-42 was reduced to furtive defense. The numbers told it plainly. From the start of sustained P-38 ops, Japanese fighter units in the Solomons and New Guinea bled out. The 251st Air Group opened 1943 with 80 pilots. Only 10 originals remained by year's end. The 204th lost 70% of its pilots in 6 months. The 582nd was pulled out after losing 80% of its aircraft in 4 months against P-38 equipped units. U.S. losses, while real, were manageable. Lightning squadrons often posted 5.1 kill ratios or better. Downed American pilots at sea were frequently picked up by air-sea rescue and flew again. Japanese pilots forced into the water usually didn't make it. U.S. aircraft with combat damage got repaired and returned. Japanese machines with similar hits were often scrapped for lack of parts. Industry kept pulling the gap wider. By December 1943, Lockheed had delivered more than 2,000 Lightnings to combat theaters with monthly output above 400. Japanese total fighter production barely touched 500 a month. Many held back to guard the home islands. Attrition's arithmetic became relentless. Training diverged further. Late 1943, U.S. P-38 pilots arrived with strong instrument skills, vertical tactics, and long-range nav practice. Some had drilled against captured Japanese types and knew the exact strengths and limits they'd face. Japanese replacements, pushed through programs slashed from 2 years to 6 months, reached the front with thin preparation and no first-hand experience against P-38s. The human side mattered. Pilots who had started as elite masters found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't catch or shake. Letters captured on islands spoke of deep discouragement, nightmares about twin boom shapes dropping out of the sun, requests to transfer to ground units rather than meet P-38s again. Americans, by contrast, flew with growing certainty. The Lightning stacked the deck, speed, altitude, guns, and reach. They could choose the fight and keep initiative. That confidence was its own weapon. Calm pilots took smart risks and produced results. Richard Bong embodied that edge. By April 1944, he had passed Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I mark of 26. His method had become almost surgical. Climb to 30,000 feet, above anything Japan could send, then pick targets carefully. His strikes were quick, exact, final. He often used under 100 rounds per kill, a mark of rare gunnery. His career total of 40, all in P-38s, reflected both his skill and the system's superiority. He brought down veteran aces who simply had no answer for the Lightning's envelope. Over Hollandia, he downed 3 in under 5 minutes with textbook vertical moves that left opponents with nothing to do. Thomas McGuire pushed the type further. His tactical handbook spread theater-wide. He stressed mutual support, pairs and fours working vertical scissors to box enemies between converging lightnings. His 38 victories from August 1943 to January 1945 showed how deadly the doctrine could be. Meanwhile, the airplane kept evolving. The G model improved turbos to hold power above 30,000 feet. The H model upped engine output to 1,125 horsepower each. The J moved intercoolers into the booms, clearing the pilot's view and boosting altitude performance. The L added boosted ailerons that transformed roll rate. Each step nudged the math further. U.S. Ward. A P-38J worked comfortably at 35,000 feet, levels where Japanese pilots struggled to stay conscious. The L's roll finally erased the Zero's last thin edge in flat turning. By late 1944, there was nothing a Japanese fighter could do better than a P-30L. Japanese answers grew desperate. Ramming, honorable but costly, rose as standard attacks failed. Special units trained for one-way strikes. Some tried to pull P-38s into cloud banks and clutter the picture. They had moments, but nothing that changed the core imbalance. The Philippines campaign in late 1944 showed the Lightning at full stride. Within days of the landings, the P-38 had the air over Leyte. Japanese attempts to fly in reinforcements ended in ruin. On November 2, 1944, the 49th Group's P-38s downed 26 Japanese aircraft without loss. One-sided results that had become common. Strategic bombing of forward bases leaned on P-38 escort. B-24s could range deep across the Southwest Pacific, knowing Lightnings would be there. Japanese interceptors, held off altitude when P-38s were present, were reduced to weak edge attacks. Airfields, fuel stockpiles, depots, one by one they went up. The F-5 Recon variant, cameras in place of guns, mapped the theater from extreme heights. Speed and ceiling made them nearly untouchable. Their film gave planners precise targets. By early 1945, Japanese air power in the Southwest Pacific was essentially gone. The last experienced hands had been pulled back to guard the home islands. Replacements with minimal training and outdated airframes were thrown into hopeless defense. The P-38 had moved past air superiority into air supremacy. The casualty balance was stark. From December 1942 to January 1945, Southwest Pacific P-38 units claimed over 1,500 Japanese aircraft destroyed, verified. Fewer than 200 Lightnings fell to enemy action. A kill ratio above 7.1, rare in air war. But beyond the math, the type's effect was transformational. It proved that the side with the better envelope and the right tactics could beat numbers and experience. It showed that winning the sky was less about classic dogfights and more about dictating when and how fights happened. It underlined that training pipelines and industry mattered as much as bravery. Both sides remembered the Lightning with strong feeling. Americans praised its range, reliability, and brutal effectiveness. Japanese veterans called it the machine that ended their reign, the twin-boom devil you couldn't catch and couldn't escape. Ground crews valued its toughness and serviceability, even with complex systems. The Echo carried past the war. P-38 lessons fed post-war fighter design. Vertical fighting became core to the jet age. Altitude and speed over flat turning shaped everything from the F-86 Sabre to modern fifth-generation jets. The P-38's blend of technology, tactics, and training became a model for air forces worldwide. Lockheed's team, under Clarence Kelly Johnson, hadn't just built a good fighter, they had shifted the art. The twin-boom layout, driven by the need to house two engines and turbos, gave performance a single-engine airplane couldn't match. All-nose armament erased the convergence headaches of wing guns. Twin engines offered a safety margin across the Pacific's empty miles. The pilots wrote the legend. Bong's 40 victories became the American record. McGuire's 38 and his tactical imprint shaped doctrine for decades. Dozens more P-38 aces proved that with the right machine and training, American pilots could dominate any sky. Those who faced it from the other side showed courage against odds. Flying worn designs into a superior envelope, Japanese pilots kept fighting long after hope of victory was gone. Their accounts remain vital to understanding how the air war evolved. The hardware traces still dot the Pacific, wrecked P-38s and Japanese fighters sunk in jungle and lagoon from New Guinea to the Philippines. Each site marks young men who fought and fell in a struggle that remade the world. Islanders still find shells, gauges, and personal gear, small artifacts of enormous battles. Museums keep lightnings alive. Restored examples thunder over air shows, that unmistakable twin-boom silhouette drawing eyes. Veterans swap stories, missions flown, friends missed. Historians keep returning to the campaigns where the lightning swung outcomes. The airplane that stunned Japanese pilots in 1942 remains an icon of American aviation. Modern doctrine still echoes those lessons. Altitude and speed are fundamentals. Technology only wins when paired with sound tactics and training. Logistics and industry sustain the fight. The fusion of intelligence, operations, and precision that made the Yamamoto mission possible remains a benchmark. From December 1942 to early 1945, the shift was total, and it stuck. Skies once owned by the Zero now belonged to the Lightning. The naval air arm that entered the war among the world's best had been ground down. The myth of the untouchable Zero ace cracked under American engineering and training. In the end, the P-38's impact reached beyond tally sheets. It was industrial democracy, out-innovating military authoritarianism. It showed how new ideas can beat experience, how a system can overcome individual edge. The twin-boom fighter so many first dismissed rewrote the rulebook. The Solomons, where the Lightning first shocked its opponents, became the forge of modern air combat. Every jet that came after, every beyond visual range shot, every precision strike guided by intelligence, traces some lineage to those hard lessons over tropical islands. The P-38 didn't just win a campaign, it changed what air war meant. For the Japanese pilots who lived through it, the memory stayed sharp. Twin boom shadows dropping from heights they couldn't reach. Perfect leads ruined by an enemy too fast to bracket. Mentors lost one by one to a fighter that broke the old rules. American veterans remembered a different feeling. Confidence in the best machine in theater. The clean satisfaction of a controlled diving attack. The comfort of two engines over endless water. And the steady advantage of holding height. The Lightning didn't merely defeat Japanese air power, it reshaped aerial combat. Over the Solomons, from December 1942 to war's end, the future of air fighting was drafted. That future favored nations that could field superior tech, train competent pilots, and keep campaigns going. By the close, the P-38 had shocked, worn down, and ultimately broken Japanese air strength in the Pacific. The twin-boom fighter they learned to fear stripped away their ability to contest the skies, helping lock in American air control and hasten the end of the Pacific War. The revolution it began still runs through air power today, a lasting testament to American ingenuity and to the courage of the Lightning's pilots.